race in the West that has captured complete national attention is the gubernatorial contest in the state of California. It's the actor against the old pro. The actor, Republican Ronald Reagan, against the incumbent governor, Edmund Pat Brown. Also some interesting Senate races in the far West in the states of Oregon, Wyoming, and Montana. Ronald Reagan comes from the sound stages of Southern California. He finds his great strength in that part of the state where most of the people live. Governor Brown found himself an underdog early in the campaign. He's been gaining, but maybe not enough. He needs a substantial amount of votes in the north of the state to have any chance of winning. Oregon's senatorial race is between the Republican Governor Mark Hatfield and Robert Duncan, a Democratic congressman. And the issue is Vietnam. It's for the seat that was vacated by Senator Maureen Neuberger. Hatfield, although he has modified his position somewhat on Vietnam, has been severely critical of our military posture there. Duncan stands foursquare behind administration policies. The contest, in a sense, is a referendum in Oregon on our military posture in Southeast Asia. Another Vietnam contest shapes up in the state of Montana. The incumbent Senator, Democrat Lee Metcalf, versus Republican Governor Tim Babcock. Metcalf calls himself a chicken hawk. He says he doesn't want a pullout. He would like to see de-escalation. Babcock, meanwhile, is a Goldwater-type conservative. The Wyoming senatorial race matches a Democratic Congressman Tino Roncalio against the Republican governor of that state, Clifford Hansen. Teddy Kennedy has campaigned vigorously for Roncalio, who delivered the Wyoming delegation to John F. Kennedy at the 1960 convention, and it could be close. Those are the key races in the far West. Now back to Howard K. Smith.
Seated in this empty chair to my right will be on election night Edward P. Morgan. Ed will offer incisive analysis on individual contests and nationwide trends. He's currently making a final canvass of the country and is in California covering the Brown-Reagan contest. For a report on the nation's hottest gubernatorial fight, here now is Edward P. Morgan, broadcasting from Los Angeles.
The California electorate is behaving a little like a woman buying a new hat. It can't seem to make up its mind. At least the pollsters say 16 to 20% of the voters still are undecided in the major race. These undecideds are the only real hope Governor Pat Brown has, and the trouble is he himself is old hat. After 2 Brown terms, voters are shopping around for newer, flashier political millinery. And some of them think that they have found it in the person of ex-actor Ronald Reagan. Brown himself admits that Reagan now is ahead in the polls. But it's the undecided margin who still say they don't know what they're going to do that the Democrats rather desperately are counting on. Who cares about the Brown-Reagan race outside of the people in this most populous state of the Union? Few perhaps except professional politicians. But in this era of television, if Reagan should win, he would make a devastating contender for the Republican presidential nomination in 1968. And then Death Valley days might provide an unwanted role for a George Romney or a Richard Nixon. This is Edward P. Morgan in Los Angeles.
Governor Pat Brown has an amazing facility for defying the predictions of pollsters. He is always the hopeless underdog who always has managed to win. Again this year, the polls say he doesn't have a prayer of winning. ABC's pollster, John Kraft, is with Bill Lawrence, and I'd like to ask him, John, is there any chance that Pat Brown can pull it off this time?
No, Howard, I don't think so. That lead of 5 or 6% Mr. Reagan has right now would seem to be too much for the governor to overcome.
John, my colleagues and I are certainly in agreement in advance of the election anyway that the Republicans will at best score modest gains in the House of Representatives, and there'll hardly be any changes in the Senate at all. What are the major issues that produce this trend, if indeed you can call it a trend?
Well, the issues that people talk about when they are asked about these elections are inflation, Vietnam, which should be first, civil rights, law and order, and things like that.
What do you mean Vietnam should be first?
Well,
is it really an overriding issue?
It's the number one problem on the minds of people as we talk to them.
Well, is it really a decisive issue in any contests other than those, say, in Oregon, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire?
No, it really doesn't cut that way. It is a major problem, but it affects very few elections, on a senatorial level, certainly.
Well, what kind of an effect do you think it's going to have, say, in the Duncan-Hatfield race?
Well, I think in the Duncan-Hatfield race, it was favoring Mr. Duncan very strongly early in the middle part of this campaign, but Mr. Hatfield may well have overcome it by now.
I see. Well, John, where and why is white backlash really an issue?
Well, it's a very important issue in such states as Massachusetts, Maryland, Illinois, where it could lose the election for Senator Douglas, and Arkansas, where Democrat Jim Johnson has come up strongly on that issue, and it could certainly help defeat Governor Brown in California.
John, given these modest gains, which is what we're talking about now, how do you think this will affect President Johnson's record in the Congress on domestic issues, where up until now, anyway, it's been slightly fabulous?
Well, I shouldn't think it would have much effect at all, Bill. The changes are going to be so slight.
Well, do you see any real possibilities now for a resurgence of the old Northern Republican, conservative, Southern Democrat coalition that held the Congress for so very long?
No, I really don't. These Republicans who are likely to unseat Democrats are northern Republicans, and they tend to be somewhat liberal, moderate Republicans.
And so you think the Great Society will continue to zoom along at a pretty good speed domestically?
Yes, I should think so.
Whatever the outcome.
Right.
Well, John, all of these pre-election analyses of the voters are interesting, but in the final analysis, it will be the vote put into the ballot box next Tuesday that really counts. And that's what you and I will be here to analyze that day.